Some leaders are praised for their vision, others are condemned for their methods. But what if one person is both? Today, we're diving into the story of Lee Kuan Yew, the founding father of modern Singapore. He's a figure of just immense achievement, but also some really intense debate.
And right here, in his own words, you get the absolute core of his story. This quote, it perfectly frames the central tension of his legacy, right? He used these often controversial authoritarian methods, but in his mind, it was all for the noble goal of building a nation. So that leads to the big question. What exactly did he build?
Well, just look at these numbers. They're absolutely staggering. In just a single generation, Singapore went from this developing nation with huge unemployment and low literacy to a global economic powerhouse. This wasn't just growth, it was a complete and total transformation. Okay, so let's get into how this all happened, and we're going to start right at the beginning. Lee Kuan Yew's intense political drive didn't just come out of nowhere. It was really shaped by the defining crises of his youth. These experiences that turned him from a colonial subject into a fiercely determined nation builder. So, he was born under British rule, right? But then, the brutal Japanese occupation during World War II, that just changed everything for him. He said it himself, it shattered all the assumptions of the Englishman's superiority. That experience, followed by studying law at Cambridge, just fueled his anti-colonial fire. It led him to co-found the People's Action Party, the PAP, with one crystal-clear goal: self-governance for Singapore. But here's the thing. Independence didn't come the way he planned. At all. In fact, Singapore's entire existence as its own country was actually the result of a painful, unexpected failure. See, back in 1963, Singapore merged with Malaya to form Malaysia. Lee was convinced this was the only way to survive. But just 2 years later, after all this racial strife and political conflict, Singapore was kicked out, expelled. And that left them with this absolutely terrifying question. Could this tiny island, with zero natural resources and a divided population, actually make it on its own? And what's so powerful here is the raw emotion. This quote is from the televised press conference where Lee had to announce the separation. He wasn't celebrating independence. He was literally fighting back tears on camera. This wasn't some moment of triumph for him, it was a moment of profound crisis, of real anguish. It was from that absolute moment of crisis that Lee Kuan Yew's vision for Singapore really took shape. He responded not with despair, but with this incredibly pragmatic, decisive, and ambitious plan. The blueprint itself was remarkably clear. Step 1, focus relentlessly on the economy. Bring in foreign companies to create jobs because people desperately needed them. Step 2, establish social order. That meant cracking down hard on corruption and providing quality public housing for everybody. This was about giving people a real stake in the country's success. And step 3, build a strong defense force from scratch, because the British military was leaving. And you can see that plan in action right here. These Housing and Development Board Flats, or HDBs, they were so much more than just buildings. They were a social revolution. They gave families stability, created a sense of shared community, and really became the bedrock of modern Singaporean society. To really get the scale of the challenge he was facing, just look at this number. When Lee first became prime minister in 1959, unemployment was at a staggering 13.5%. The economic situation was, to put it mildly, dire. Now, fast forward to 1990. This is when he stepped down as prime minister. That unemployment rate, it had plummeted to just 1.7%. That one statistic just powerfully shows the incredible success of his economic blueprint. But, and this is a big but, this progress came at a cost. Yeah, achieving that kind of stability and growth involved methods that earned Lee and his government the label of authoritarian. And this is the whole other side of his legacy, the part that is still deeply, deeply controversial today. So critics often describe his system as an illiberal democracy. What does that mean? Basically, it's a system where, yeah, you have elections, but civil liberties, things like freedom of the press, freedom of speech, are seriously restricted. The justification was often that the stability of the community was more important than individual freedoms, an idea that has deep roots in Confucian values. So what did this illiberal democracy actually look like in practice? Well, the government controlled the press, making sure the news was always favorable. They used these punishing defamation lawsuits that could financially ruin political opponents and scare off anyone else who might want to speak up. And under something called the Internal Security Act, rivals could be locked up indefinitely without a trial. These weren't just abstract ideas, they were powerful tools that basically neutralized all opposition. So when you step back and look at the whole picture, you've got these two very clear threads: incredible prosperity on one hand and undeniable authoritarianism on the other. It's this dual nature that makes his legacy so complex and why it's still so fiercely debated.
When Lee Kuan Yew passed away in 2015 at the age of 91, it truly marked the end of an era. The outpouring of national grief was immense, and it showed the deep respect so many Singaporeans had for the man who built their nation, even as that debate over his methods continued.
And this brings us to the final critical question. Is the Singapore model, trading some of those civil liberties for rapid development, for security, for prosperity, is that a blueprint that other developing nations should follow? Or is it a warning about the price of progress? It's a question with no easy answer. And honestly, it's the enduring puzzle of Lee Kuan Yew's legacy.